during these turbulent times. And it is easy for those who decry what Madiba did to sit back and be critical of the leadership that he provided as he sought to mesh us into a nation. The winds of change were sweeping across the land. The African National Congress and other liberation movements had been unbanned, and their leadership were making their way home from exile. The government was bankrupt, and the economy was in free fall, rendering the state the liberation movement stood to inherit hollow and weakened. The right wing were mobilizing and marshalling their forces of intolerance to railroad the negotiation process. Many of the doomsday prophets said it would be impossible under these conditions to bring South Africa back from the brink. And yet, coming together as a nation, we did, under the leadership of Nelson Mandela, who had vision and foresight, who had the strength of the organization that he led.
Well, our reporter Aisha Ismail joins us now from the Grand Parade in Cape Town. She's been there all the time throughout what's been going on, the commemoration there, and through the speech from the president, of course. Aisha, what were the main takeaways for you when the president gave his speech?
Well, I think that President Cyril Ramaphosa certainly took a leaf out of Nelson Mandela's book. He again called for peace and reconciliation, and he was talking about the challenges still facing South Africa, and he talked about corruption, he talked about social ills, gender-based violence and an ailing economy, but did call on South Africans not to lose hope, but to continue with Nelson Mandela's dream of creating a better life for all South Africans. And he also went further by saying that people fought for the release and fought hard for the release of Nelson Mandela, and tirelessly, and said that it was as a result of the fight by people of South Africa that Nelson Mandela and other political prisoners were released, and that that brought an end to apartheid. And he said that it was not Mandela's release was not as a result of goodwill by F.W. de Klerk. He said that F.W. de Klerk did not release Nelson Mandela out of the goodness of his heart, but it was rather because of the pressure from the people of South Africa.
Now, Aisha, I know you've had a chance to speak to some of the ANC stalwarts that were there as well. Talk to us about the attendance of this commemoration.
Well, there were lots of people, but I mean, obviously not half as much of the people that were here about 30 years ago. Most of the people who attended were invited guests. They were dignitaries. Some of them came from the embassies and from big businesses, and also politicians who were present here. It was actually quite sad to see that there weren't many ordinary people, you know, those ordinary people who, as President Cyril Ramaphosa said, fought for the release of Nelson Mandela and for the end of apartheid. So there were about, you know, a couple of hundred, or maybe, you know, about 2,000 people here today. And that was quite, for me, that turnout was quite disappointing.
You spoke to Jay Naidu as well earlier on, and he spoke about the security concerns at that particular time, 30 years ago.
That is correct, and Jay Naidu was also referring to the character of Madiba, saying that after spending 27 years in jail, Madiba was still wanting to show them, you know, invite them into his house and told them to come in and sit down, and all they wanted was for him to come out so that the people of South Africa could see him. But also earlier, when President Ramaphosa spoke, he talked about how he was there at the prison chosen to go and meet Madiba, and then when they were on their way back to, well, coming to the Grand Parade, they lost Madiba for a couple of hours. They didn't know which way his car went, and he said that that was one of their main worries. How are they going to explain to the people of South Africa that they had lost Madiba? But in the end, Madiba did arrive to take his place up on the balcony here at the City Hall and to make that historic speech.